Welcome to the Pump Fake post-divisional round episode. Jarrett Bailey with you. Joining me today from SB Nation, the wonderful JP Acosta. First-time guest, JP Acosta. It's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
It's good to see you too, man. It's awesome always being it's always awesome being the first time guest because you gotta kind of feel it out a little bit, kind of see
Right.
what you can and can't do. But I'm excited.
We had people talk about divisional weekend as the quote-unquote best weekend of the football season. Um, I don't necessarily think it was that this past weekend. Obviously, I think it was the best group of teams. But the games themselves, I mean, for lack of a better term, I mean, were very one-sided for the most part. Well, we can start with we'll kind of go a little bit out of order because I do want to talk about Buffalo and Cincinnati. Um, you know, Going into the game, all the talk was around obviously what happened 22 days ago now at this point in Cincinnati with the Damar Hamlin incident and how that shaked up everything in the AFC playoff picture and why the game was being played in Buffalo. Right away, though, man, Cincinnati was just in control. Drive down the field, I think it was 7 plays, 67 yards. And then it's capped off with the touchdown pass from Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, and Cincinnati didn't look back whatsoever. Hayden Hurst scores on the next drive for Cincinnati. It's 14-0. And the Bills just didn't look like they showed up. Cincinnati just owned them from the start. And Buffalo fans are obviously disappointed because of the expectations placed on them coming into the year. They were the odds-on Super Bowl favorite. But if you're Cincinnati, I mean, starting after their start to the season to where they are now, man, it is incredible what that team has done. So your thoughts on that game as a whole?
My thoughts are, man, the Bengals coaching staff is amazing with what they've been able to do with the talent that they have, being able to roll in 3 new offensive line starters and dominate a Bills team on the ground that I know they didn't have Von Miller. That's still a very, very loaded defensive line group.
Shout out Jackson Carman.
Yeah, Jackson Carman played great. Cordell Volson, the rookie, played really well. Hakeem Adeniji was filling in at right tackle, played really well. And one thing that I thought they did to kind of counter what the Bills do a lot is they got Teron Johnson involved in the action a lot. So they'll motion. Whenever they motion, the Bills will bump Teron Johnson into the box. And, you don't really want to have your 190-pound slot corner taking on offensive tackles or guards. Sure. And they got into that a lot. They got into a lot of gap schemes, which I think was really good because last year their issue was they didn't do a lot of run schemes. They run the ball very well, and they only had one type of run. It was under center. But now they've kind of diversified that. They changed a lot of what they did in the middle of this season, and now you can see that coming to full fruition. And then the defense, man, they completely put a vice grip around the Bills offense. They limited all the explosive plays, and what they did, they kind of fried Josh Allen's brain. They kind of had him seeing a little bit of things that weren't there. They had him thinking blitz when they weren't blitzing, and then as soon as he didn't think they were going to blitz, Mike Hilton's coming free off the corner and cracking him. So it was a really, really good defensive game plan, and just a massively, one team executed a whole lot better than another team.
I'm glad that you brought up Mike Hilton because I think he had 5 pressure. He was sent on 5 blitzes, I believe, this game, and he got pressure on 4 of them, including the play that looked like it was going to be a fumble. It didn't end up being a fumble, it was an incomplete pass or whatnot. But whether it was, the delayed slot cornerback blitzes by Hilton or just the simulated pressures that the Bills just couldn't hit, like Lou Anarumo deserves. I'm surprised he's not getting more talk about being a head coach, especially with we're seeing defensive-minded guys like D'Amico Ryans get looks, and maybe he's a year away, and that's fine. But what he did on the road in the elements against a team that most expected to win that game, absolutely fantastic job holding Josh Allen and Buffalo to just 10 points on the game. So, yeah, man, it was I'm glad that you also brought up the coaching staff as well as a whole, because last year the conversation around Cincinnati was, all right, it's great that, toss it to Jamar and pray is working, but eventually they kind of have to get more diverse in their offense. And after the first 2 weeks of this season, when the offensive line was struggling, I think they did that really well. You mentioned how they run the ball. They run a lot more out of gun now. They got Samaje Perine, who's become more of a focal point of their offense, spelling Joe Mixon. It's very, very interesting to see how Zach Taylor's been like, oh, okay, this is no longer working. What can I do to make things work with the guys that I have. And they're doing a very good job. I don't see anybody beating them right now. Like, I get that Mahomes is great, but he's got the bum ankle. The Bengals have more talent on both sides of the ball. And then on the NFC side, like, you're going to go up against either an Eagles team with a head coach who lacks the experience that they do, or you're going to go up against a coach who does have the experience, but with a 7th-round rookie quarterback. Like, whomever their matchup is for the rest of the year, I think that they have the edge.
I was thinking about that going into today, and I was like, man, if the Bengals make the Super Bowl, they beat Kansas City and make the Super Bowl again, are they going to be favored? And I'm still kind of kicking around in my head. I'm still a little unsure. I know that the Niners are starting Brock Purdy, 7th-round rookie, but man, that team is loaded, and it's
so
going to
good, man.
It's
so
going to
good.
be really hard for me to pick against them because, like, I know we haven't even talked about the Niners Cowboys game yet, but
we'll get to it. Don't you worry.
yeah, what they did to the Cowboys offense was just phenomenal. Like that, it wasn't like Dak played poorly, yes, but the Niners defense put an offense that was scoring 40 points a game almost on the regular into a box. 12 points, like, and 1 touchdown is insane in the divisional round of the playoffs. And they forced them into doing things they really didn't want to.
When it comes down to the defensive scheming too, like we know how good Fred Warner is. By the way, him keeping up with CeeDee Lamb.
That is
absurd. Oh my God.
That is preposterous. Like, you can't do that in Madden. I don't care.
We talk about how, like, Mahomes is in his own stratosphere when it comes to quarterback play. I think it's time we start talking about Fred Warner in terms of linebacker play being in just his own world. Because if you look at especially his advanced metrics, like, I don't remember at what point in the season it was. I want to say it was around the Miami game where they were talking about the 49ers defense and how the percentage of passes they allowed completed over the middle when Fred Warner's playing compared to when he's not playing. Like, it was like a 16% difference. It was astronomical, just the difference what happens when he is there versus when he's not on the field. It is absolutely fantastic what he does to a defense, and just his ability to make plays no matter where. It's fantastic what he does. But guys like Demo Lenore, who's had interceptions in consecutive games, like, they're having other guys step up. They picked up was it Tayshaun Gibson at safety. They picked him up off the streets, and he's been playing really well. That speaks to how well Kyle Shanahan is a head coach, but also D'Amico Ryans is a defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm. And they're getting contribution from everybody. Dre Greenlaw's having an all-pro year. You're getting contribution from Jordan Willis.
He did have that penalty the other day that fans were very not happy with.
very mad at the penalty, but Jordan Willis playing really well. They're getting great play from Javon Kinlaw, who was a draft pick in, I believe, 2020, who still hadn't panned out till this year, and now he's just dominating in the run game. And they're getting all these guys who play at such a high level at the right time. And it just makes it so hard to game plan and scheme against this team because they can roll waves of guys at you. Like, Javon Kinlaw comes in with the second unit and Jordan Willis comes in. You can take Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead off the field, and they're still getting pressure on you. Like, that's insane to think about.
And on the Cowboys side of it too, like, and I tweeted about this because, like, at this point, it feels like they've just kind of peaked with Dak. And it might be a year early for them to say, okay, maybe we should consider other options because, is Dak, are you better off with Derek Carr than Dak? I don't think so. Are they going to make a power move and trade for Aaron Rodgers? Probably not at this point in his career. And plus, I don't think Aaron would go there. But the point being, like, I just don't see this team getting much further than what they have with Dak Prescott. And I don't know, man. At some point, that front office has to start. Jerry Jones has to start asking himself that question because he's getting, Lord only knows how much longer he's going to be at the head of this table. He's getting older, and he wants to win. We know that. But I think that has to start being an internal conversation. Like, okay, should we start, maybe planning for life after Dak?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing I took away for the Cowboys side is that team needs some juice. That team needs energy at the skill position. As soon as Tony Pollard went out the game, there goes all the juice. CeeDee Lamb is the only guy who can create some explosion after the catch. And when the Niners know that, when every other team knows that, they just put a grip on everybody else. Like, Michael Gallup played really bad, and then you're relying on Dalton Schultz for explosive targets, and that's not Dalton.
Who's a fine tight end, but not in that type of role.
He's not a field stretcher tight end.
No.
He is 6-yard out routes, 6-yard curls. Every time Dak is throwing a curl route, it's Dalton Schultz 6 yards. But they just need some kind of explosiveness in their skill room. I think they lost it when they traded Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup getting hurt didn't help at all, but I'm kind of refraining from like saying like, hey, this might be the end of the Dak thing because this team offensively really was not built to succeed in the long term. They were built on extremely efficient death by 5 and 6 yard plays. That doesn't work against a team like the Niners who can just
No.
constrict everything and force you to beat them deep when you don't have guys like that. So they desperately need guys who can stretch the field vertically, give them some kind of explosiveness offensively.
Do you know what Ezekiel Elliott's cap hit is next year?
Oh God. Oh no. It's gonna make me so sad.
This is like a little version of The Price is Right. This is fun. Here, let me pull up the exact number because I know what like the approximate is, but I want to get it exact for you. So next year, his cap hit just over $16 million.
Oh no.
16,720,000.
Oh no.
They can only save, I think, 4 million, like a little bit less than 5 million if they cut him. So there's no like real reason. They're not saving any money if they get rid of him. But if he's on the roster, he's taking up that much money, and his dead cap is 11 million. So like they're handcuffed to him, and that is much of Jerry's doing.
Yep, it's years of Jerry's doing kind of coming to a head at this point, where you see the offensive line starting to wear down a little bit. Tyron Smith didn't play another full year, but he played really well at right tackle. You're starting to wonder, like, kind of where the future of the supporting cast goes from here. You know, Dak is going to be there. Dak is not getting traded. Dak is not getting cut. They are tied to Dak until further notice. They are tied to Dak Prescott. But the supporting cast around Dak might be going through a little bit of a change.
No, this isn't the 2016, 2017 Cowboys offensive line, especially.
Yep, it's not the same offensive line. It's definitely not the same receiver group. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the offseason to kind of both maintain a defense that played really well against San Francisco and try and upgrade an offense that desperately needs it.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to bring in, they signed James Washington from Pittsburgh, but they waived him a few weeks back. So, like, and this isn't an especially deep free agent class when it comes to receivers, too. Like, Juju's expected to be a free agent. I think MVS from Kansas City is potentially going to be. So, if they want a guy, maybe you go out and trade for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, or maybe you try to get a guy like T. Higgins or Chris Godwin, somebody like that who can be like a really reliable target. And a 1B, not necessarily a number 2 to CeeDee Lamb, because we've seen plenty of instances where 1A 1B can work, and I think if they do that, then they'll definitely be cooking. But yeah, having that lack of explosiveness definitely hurts them. What does Mike McCarthy's future in Dallas look like to you?
Man, it's gonna be a real rough offseason for Mike McCarthy.
Like, if you're Dallas, are you better just booting him and promoting Dan Quinn?
Man, I haven't thought about that.
He's getting, talked about for head coaching jobs or whatnot. If you're Dallas, you definitely don't want to lose him. And I think that if they've peaked with Dak, they've absolutely peaked with Mike McCarthy. So why not, promote a guy who seems to be well liked in the building and is good at what he does? And I think that that's a conversation that should be had.
I think it definitely is, because when you look at this Cowboys team over the past couple of years, this team has looked like a lot of the Mike McCarthy teams we saw in Green Bay. They're very penalized.
Especially near the end of the Mike McCarthy time in Green Bay, yes.
They're very penalized. We saw that happen in the San Francisco game. They had a lot of penalties. The fourth down decisions, again, this is Mike McCarthy. This is always what Mike McCarthy does. So it is going to be a very interesting conversation around his future. If I'm guessing, he's probably going to stay another year, because I think Jerry Jones said after the game, Mike McCarthy is safe for now. But it's definitely something you have to consider, especially if Dan Quinn ends up leaving. And now it's like, hey, it's really on you now.
Safe for now. Are you a wrestling guy?
Yes.
Did you watch the Roman Reigns thing on Raw last night? Yeah, you're not guilty for now. That's Mike McCarthy right now. He's man, comparing Sami Zayn to Mike McCarthy doesn't feel right, but in this brief little bubble, that's what he is at the moment.
In this little thought experiment, we're kind of thinking Mike McCarthy is taking a steel chair to Nick Sirianni in the championship game. So
Agreed. Giants, Eagles, very lopsided. The Giants were out of it very early. They looked like the Giants have passed in this game. And obviously, football is a week-to-week sport. Things happen. The Eagles are a much more talented team on both sides of the ball. And the Giants, I think, were somewhat playing with house money. No one expected them to be there. They were just happy to be there. They got a playoff win this year, like tip of the cap to them. But now the question becomes, all right, Saquon Barkley's going to be a free agent. He reportedly turned down a deal that would pay him $12 million a year. Daniel Jones, you got to figure out what they're going to do with him. If you are Joe Shen, are you attempting to bring back Saquon, Daniel Jones, or both right now?
I don't know how possible it is, but I'm trying to bring back both. I think Saquon is the engine of that offense, but I do think Daniel Jones played rather well considering the circumstances and everything he was given. I mean, Isaiah Hodgins was their number one receiver this year, and they picked him up in November. They had Richie James playing.
Off the Bills practice squad, he was their number one receiver in the playoffs.
He was there. He had 105 yards against the
Vikings. Against
Minnesota. And they picked him up in November around Thanksgiving. So he played well considering what he was given, but I don't know if I'm giving him like the exclusive top tier starter money. I think our mid-level QB contract is fine for Daniel Jones because that's what he is. He is a mid-level QB in the NFL. You definitely know the engine is Saquon Barkley in that run game. And that's something like, hey, not every quarterback can do. Not every quarterback is going to be able to make all those yards off scrambles like Daniel Jones did. That was a huge part of their offense. So I try and keep both, but I don't know how feasible it is.
When I think of Daniel Jones, I think he's like this Giants team reminds me a lot of that Jaguars team that went to the AFC Championship game in 2017, where everybody was kind of just waiting for the quarterback to do something wrong. Now, Daniel Jones is better than Blake Bortles. I'm not trying to say that he's that bad. I do think that he does have a very clear ceiling.
Yeah.
And if you look at the quarterbacks that are going to be available this offseason, as you hear a giant 18-wheeler roll by outside, did you hear that? Yeah. If you look at the guys that are going to be available, like if you're Joe Shen, you're asking yourself, okay, should we bring back Daniel Jones, or are we better suited bringing in a guy like Derek Carr? Would that help us become better? So I do think that those are questions that much like a lot of other teams with quarterback questions are going to be asking themselves. I like Daniel Jones. I applaud Kafka and Brian Dable for leaning into what he does well, which is run the football and let the offense develop off of that. Like, especially against Minnesota, they were playing a ton of man coverage. And I think the game plan going in was like, all right, Danny, if you see a man, run, because they know that they were horrible against stopping it.
It was very much a one read. If he's not open, go.
Yep. But, you can only do that so many times, though, against so many teams. And that's the thing that worries me about Daniel Jones is, yes, he cut down on the turnovers a lot. And I think that Brian Dable might just be like a guy who just gets rid of turnovers because he did it with Josh Allen, and then he leaves, and then Josh Allen's turnovers skyrocket right back up. Daniel Jones was the worst in the league at turning the ball over, and then he, is one of the best at protecting the ball this year. So I do think that when it comes to the money, though, I don't know. I mean, well, what's that look like for you? Because I don't think they're going to, if you franchise tag him, it's $45 million. That ain't worth it. What do you, I mean, 33 million a year, something around there?
Man, per year, I was thinking around the 20-25 million range. Just
I wonder, the mid-level quarterback contract is a very perplexing thing because I feel like it's almost a thing that, I mean, is it really a thing right now? For like non-1-year prove it guys?
I feel like we're going to get to the point in the offseason where I think Geno and Daniel Jones possibly get the same kind of contract. Yes. And that's kind of the mid-level QB contract that I'm thinking because they're good starters. They're played really well. But it gives them an option in case, like, hey, if things go south, like it gives them an out just in case. Where the Giants, like, hey, if this Daniel Jones thing doesn't work out next year, you're in prime position where, hey, you can try and trade up and get a quarterback depending on the situation.
So if we look at cap hits right now, if he were to be in that range of like 20 to 25, like Matthew Stafford's only a $20 million cap hit right now. Russell Wilson's a 22, but that'll go up next year, obviously. So, I mean, yeah, Marcus Mariota's a 14.5. Joe Burrow's obviously on a rookie deal. So somewhere in there, and it comes down to, all right, is Daniel Jones willing to do that? Which I think he will be. He seems like the type of guy who would be willing to do that. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting off season for the Giants with those two big questions looming. There was another team in that game, though, the Philadelphia Eagles, who looked absolutely unstoppable. Jalen Hurts' shoulder looks really good. We saw that very early on with that deep shot to Devontae Smith. Who's that? Was that over Adoree Jackson, I want to say, or Jordan Love? Or Julian Love, not Jordan Love. Yeah. He looked fantastic. The offense looked really good. Smith had a touchdown. They were much like Cincinnati early on. I mean, it was points early and often, put the Giants back against the wall. The Giants went for it, I think, on like 4th and 8 in Philadelphia territory instead of punting. And that kind of, when they didn't get that, I think everybody was like, all right, we could be in for a blowout. And that's what happened. If you're Philadelphia, I mean, you're hosting the NFC Championship game. You're facing the 49ers, whose defense is very good. Their offense is loaded with talent. This might be one of the more, like, in terms of quality of talent and evenly matched teams on paper, this is one of the better NFC Championship games that we've had in a very long time.
I think so. When you're just looking at the depth of talent on both teams, like, this is kind of like an all-star game.
It's like Pro Bowl rosters just clashing to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, this is a Pro Bowl roster, and this isn't even like the Super Bowl yet. But I think the thing that stood out the most with the Eagles, and it stood out the entire season, is they have so many ways they can beat you offensively. If you want to try and stay back in too high and eliminate the explosive passes, they will destroy you in the run game with the best offensive line in football. And they have 4 legitimate running options, including Jalen Hurts, who can do significant damage on the ground. So then if you try and bring a guy up and try and disrupt the run game, they're just going to hit you over the head with explosive passes. And they have guys who can win those one-on-ones with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think there's a perfect drive that's like that kind of shows that is they just ran like inside zone for like 6 straight plays, got into the red zone.
They couldn't stop it. They're like, until you stop this, we're going to keep doing it.
Then on the play in the red zone, they do the inside zone action. The nickel runs over to try and stop the inside zone. They just flip it out to Devontae Smith, and he scores a touchdown. It's like, dang, what are you even supposed to do with this? Like, all you can say is like, man, that's tough. Like, you just gotta charge that one to the game. There's really nothing you can do. And then their defense has so many ways of getting pressure. I think that was the biggest difference between the Vikings game and the Eagles game. They have the same structured defense schematically, but the Eagles have so many different dudes who can get pressure.
Yeah,
we're not just one guy. They have 5 dudes who can all be on the field at the same time rushing the passer, and that helps the DBs so much. And they don't even really need help. They can play man and be fine. They can do a lot of the coverage stuff where a lot of sacks might have been coverage sacks where nobody's open and it's letting the pressure get home. They're just so complete and playing at the right time. You can tell that Jalen Hurts is healthy, Lane Johnson's healthy. It's going to be a heavyweight hoss fight in the NFC Championship game. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
Howie Roseman had a hell of an offseason when he signed Hassan Reddick and traded for A.J. Brown. But like even in the middle of the season, he trades for Robert Quinn, and then just to get him some veteran depth on the interior, he signs Ndamukong Suh, signs Linval Joseph. Like that is a crazy season to have like over a spread of like 2 or 3 off seasons. He did it in a span of like 7 months. And it's absolutely insane. And you touched on like the different ways that they can beat you. I always come back to the Tennessee game with that because it seemed very imperative that the Titans were saying, you will not beat us running the football. And the Eagles said, okay, we'll just throw it instead. And they did. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see how the 49ers can try to slow this down. Because if the Eagles have any sort of like offensive consistency, they have the defense that can hold the 49ers playmakers in check.
Absolutely. They have the guys who I do have a little bit of questions about their linebackers in the pass game. I know Kyle Shanahan sees their linebackers in the pass game is like rubbing his hands together like an evil genius.
He's like, well, George, I know you're going to be this game, bud.
Yeah, this is going to be a heavy use of George Kittle and then Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel on the slot.
Running mesh.
Just hammering them over and over. But one thing that they can do, and one thing that the Cowboys kind of did, is they can have that positional versatility to where the Niners were playing in their 21 personnel, and the Cowboys matched that with having a bunch of safeties on the field with J-Ron Curse. And they were able to stop the run really well because they had Jonathan Hankins, who played really well. That's going to be the key to the entire game. How can the Eagles stop the run? How can the Eagles stop that 21 personnel? Because for the most part, the Cowboys did it for at least 3.5 quarters, and they just got tired. That's really not how the Cowboys are built. The Eagles are kind of built a little bit more to kind of have sustained success against the Niners, at least up front in the run game.
It's going to be a very fun NFC Championship game. I'm very much looking forward to it. We'll touch a little bit on Brock Purdy before we move on to Kansas City and Jacksonville. The offense, that was his toughest test. I mean, you look at from when he took over to now, I mean, they were playing a lot of, all right, it's the Raiders, it's Seattle's defense, it's Miami's defense, which wasn't very good all year. But even though he didn't put up the numbers that were crazy, he was still making the throws that they needed him to make. George Kittle makes that crazy circus catch. That was kind of just an improv play where he wasn't really part of the read. He just saw an opportunity, and Brock saw him taking it. It would be a hell of a story, man, if he can just if they keep this ride going and they ride him to the Super Bowl. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he handles this Philadelphia Eagles defense, which, again, it seems like it keeps getting harder and harder as it goes, but that's how it's going to be this week. This is going to be his toughest test.
It's definitely going to be the toughest test. One thing that I noticed with Brock Purdy in the Cowboys game is last year, Cowboys and Niners played, and Jimmy G made the really bad mistake throwing the interception, got hurt. Jimmy G has that kind of debilitating trait where he's like, yeah, I'm just going to throw this right to the middle of coverage.
It's the third quarter, and I haven't messed up yet. Well,
here we go.
Here we go.
He looks at Kyle Shanahan and is like, I'm sorry, this is where the ball is going. Brock Purdy hasn't made that colossal mistake yet. He almost did. There was the play against the Cowboys where he's like running to his left, then does a little spin. And
as soon as I saw that, I was like, if you take away like the uniform colors and everything and told me that was Zach Wilson, I would have believed you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that, just did like the pirouette on the left sideline, and luckily it wasn't intercepted. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
No, like he is going to do something incredibly stupid, but then he just throws it away.
Yeah.
That's good. That's fine. Like you can do that. But one thing that I thought that Kyle Shanahan did really well is he adjusted to what the Cowboys were showing him. So he basically was like, yeah, if you're going to play zone against all this, we're going to go empty. I think Brock Purdy was a little bit more comfortable out of empty, and we're just going to hammer Anthony Barr with Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey and say, good luck. Like, you have fun trying to guard Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey. I think on the last drive when they scored a touchdown, two of the critical plays were there was a Brandon Ayuk slant where he was up on Anthony Barr because they were playing zone. Then there was a Christian McCaffrey slant where they motioned him out to empty, but he was in a stack, so he got a free release. So that's something that I think can be taken over into the Eagles game, depending on how the Eagles show their coverage. But it really, for the Niners, just shows how many guys they have who can just take over a game. It's like playing 2K where you have the takeover mode and you just click the button and your player goes into takeover and they just make every shot. That is what the Niners are. They have a bunch of guys who go into takeover mode. George Kittle went into takeover mode. Brandon Ayuk can go into takeover mode. Christian McCaffrey late in the game. They just dominated on the ground. They got to a lot of counter. Because the Cowboys are showing a lot of 5-man fronts. Counter really good against 5-man fronts. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kyle Shanahan adjusts to an Eagles defense that will show them different fronts, but also show them different coverages and kind of mix up what Brock Purdy likes to do. Because one thing that's true, like Brock Purdy hasn't thrown the debilitating interception yet, but he's tried. He has tried to throw that interception many times. Like the Trevon Diggs interception that was almost interception.
Yes.
He tried to throw the debilitating interception.
I think that was the one that was deflected at the line of scrimmage and it hit Diggs like right in the chest. I think he just noticed it like a half second too late.
Like, I just wonder, is this going to be the game where the almost interceptions become actual interceptions?
That I think that's going to be the deciding factor in this. Like, if the 49ers protect the ball, like if you look at Purdy's stat line, like he's had an interception almost every game that he's played, but it's, the defense has bailed him out. That's the only mistake he's really made. Like, you can afford to make one mistake a game, unless you're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who just have stars all over the field. I'm going to be interested to see too, like if the Eagles get up like 10-0, 13-0, 13-3, like we haven't really seen Brock Purdy have to play from behind yet. And that's going to be something that's going to be, if his back's against the ball, how's he going to respond? So there's a lot of determining factors that are going to come out in the NFC Championship game. Very much looking forward to it. We'll shift gears to the first game that was played this weekend. Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. Very early on, Patrick Mahomes gets his ankle fallen on by Arden Key, high ankle sprain. Chad Henne comes in for a drive after the Jaguars punt. It's like inside their own 2. And everybody's harped on this, but it deserves mentioning. The fact that Andy Reid called a pass play right away, I think that just instilled confidence in Henne. And Isaiah Pacheco took over for the rest of the drive. I think they ran it 6 times with Pacheco that drive, including that 38-yard scamper that got him in the red zone. Kelce gets his second touchdown of the day, which, by the way, ginormous day for Travis Kelce against the Jaguars defense. We talked about the Bills. Let's talk about the Jaguars. Talk about 2 completely different feelings from 2 exact same outcomes. If you're the Jaguars, you're just happy to be there. Start off the year 3-7. You're coming off a year having Urban Meyer as your head coach, and you were looking at, all right, if we get 7 wins this year and look respectable, cool. We carry some momentum into 2023 and try to build off that. They're division champions. They win a playoff game and the 3rd largest comeback in the history of the NFL playoffs, and hung with the Kansas City Chiefs for the most part. If you're the Jaguars, you feel fantastic going into the offseason after this.
Absolutely. I think you go into the offseason and you're kind of like, hey, we know what we have. We have a quarterback. That is the one. We have a quarterback. We have some guys we can build around. We're bringing in Calvin Ridley. I know there's going to be some things that they still need to fix. Like, this team is far from perfect.
Sure.
Getting into the divisional round with a far from perfect team and being in that game, like they were in that game up until that drive with Chad Henne. They were in that game.
Even then, like, they were driving with like 7 minutes left in the red zone until Jamal Agnew fumbled. Like, if they score there, it's a 1-possession game again, and they're still back in it.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that Doug Peterson has done for the Jaguars is he's just offered that stability and that knowing that you have an adult in the room and that nothing is out of plan. Nothing isn't planned. Nothing is like, oh, we're just going to do this on a whim. Like, we didn't practice this. Like, I can legitimately say, like, as a Jaguars fan, you're watching the team and like, yeah, I know what we're doing here. I see why this is happening.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they address the defense. They really need to get better play out of Devin Lloyd and the second level group. That's really how Travis Kelce got all those catches. It was just
their linebackers are so bad against tight ends.
Finding holes in the zone. He was like that against them in week 10. He just found holes in zones, isolated them against Rayshawn Jenkins, which you can't leave Rayshawn Jenkins.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're leaving Rayshawn Jenkins on Travis Kelce, it's wraps, man.
Yeah, I love Rayshawn Jenkins, but that's not what he can do. That's not.
He could play for my team any day of the week. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, the mismatches that the Chiefs created just against the Jaguars defense, that was the biggest thing. Kelce went off. How many catches did he have? Do you know off the top of your head? I can't remember.
He had 14 catches.
Good Lord.
He had 14 catches. I think he had like 18 targets. Like everything was Kelce. And I get it, because the way the Jaguars defense plays, they're going to play in base a lot. 3 down linemen. They're playing the 3-4, 3 down linemen, Josh Allen, Travon Walker, both middle linebackers on the field. So when the Chiefs go into like 12 personnel, the Jaguars are matching it with base and basically like, hey, your linebackers are going to have to cover our tight ends. That really didn't work. That didn't work at all. I think the first drive of the game, I think the Chiefs left 12 personnel maybe twice. Jaguars were in base for all those plays. So they find ways to beat you. They find ways to find your biggest weaknesses and just hammer at it. And then Patrick Mahomes is just insane. Like, he's insane. And there's no other word. There's no more words to say how good Patrick Mahomes is. I think Sam Hoppin put out a graph the other day where he said after he suffered the ankle sprain, Patrick Mahomes averaged 0.28 EPA per play.
Good God.
Patrick Mahomes on one leg was better than everybody else at the position in the league except Patrick Mahomes with both legs. Like, what do you do? What do you do against that? Like, I was watching the game and I'm just like, man, there's some plays where I'm just like, man, you can't do anything about that. Like,
No.
there's nothing you can do.
They like he's running those like hot plays and hot passes. They're running options. The Chiefs are the only team in the NFL who can 1 week just hit you with stuff that looks like spread Big 12 football, and then the next look like the 1968 Navy team. Like it is insane what they do. And credit to Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, and the entire Chiefs coaching staff and Mahomes for being how excellent he is. But yeah, that's if the Bengals are going to have one advantage, obviously it's Mahomes with the bad ankle. And we know the story going into it is that the Chiefs lost 3 times to the Bengals last year. In terms of how they can exploit Cincinnati, they're going to need a big day from Travis Kelce. They're going to need one of these receivers to go off. Like whether like Juju had a bigger game against Jacksonville. MVS had the touchdown, but that was his only catch on the day. Kadarius Toney seems to be more of a focal point going forward. Dude, talk about a guy who's fun to watch. Kadarius Toney is so fun.
He's made of rubber. I don't know how else to explain it. They just
damn the New York Giants for trading him.
They
to the Chiefs of all places.
On screens, they get him on jet sweeps. And just like, hey man, go make a play. And what he's brought is a level of physicality to that receiver room, to that skill position room that I think was missing. Like they needed that physicality. They needed that edge at receiver because now instead of having the Tyreek Hill, just everybody go deep and then like have Travis Kelce operate. Like, no, now it's Travis Kelce operate, but everybody else is doing the tough over the middle stuff, which makes this offense even more difficult to stop because Patrick Mahomes can still do that, throw it deep, crazy Patrick Mahomes stuff, but now he's even more efficient and just dicing teams up with 5 to 6 yard completions that it makes it insanely difficult. So I think the Chiefs' game plan for both sides of the ball, the big thing is they're going to need a big Chris Jones day. And
big Chris Jones day.
I know that the Bengals offensive line just played a really fantastic game against the Bills.
The Bills don't have a Chris Jones, though.
This new offensive line has not seen Chris Jones yet. And one thing that Steve Spagnuolo did, and one thing he did against the Jaguars, is he not only will use Chris Jones in one-on-one pass rush situations, but he will find the weakest link of your offensive line and then just hammer it with Chris Jones, with blitzes. One thing that he did to the Jaguars, he would blitz, but he wouldn't bring DBs from the outside, like outside the tackle. He would bring them from inside. He'd have them loop inside, attacking the guard in the center. So you'd have Chris Jones crashing towards the center, which means the guard and the center both had to occupy him because, yeah, that's Chris Jones. And then L'Jarius Sneed is just coming flying through that unaccounted gap and cracking your quarterback. So it's just it's a phenomenal game plan and a phenomenal way of knowing who you have and what you're good at by Steve Spagnuolo, who just seems to get great play out of his defense at this point in time every year.
Robert Mays from The Athletic, on the Athletic Football Show, they were doing their yearly awards, and he gave his Defensive Player of the Year to Chris Jones. And I'm trying to find the exact stat. Of his 15 and a half sacks, I think 7.5 of them came in crunch time. Like he's their closer, man. Like if you need a big play and you're on defense in the Kansas City Chiefs, you can always count on 95 being there to disrupt things. And it was early on in the game. Frank Clark got a sack, but if you watched the interior pressure provided by Chris Jones and just how much attention is required by the opposing team just to keep him from disrupting things. Like, yes, Frank Clark got the sack, and Frank Clark's great in his own right, but Chris Jones is just out of this world and maybe a little bit underrated when we talk about, really, really good, play disruptors in this league. So that is going to be fun to watch is Chris Jones going to eat against this Bengals offensive line? And if he does, what are the adjustments that the Bengals are going to make? Because if there's anybody that has become like, I saw somebody say, I can't remember exactly who, that Joe Burrow is the closest thing that we're going to see to an athletic Tom Brady. Like, if there's anybody who can adjust and just get the ball out quick, it's going to be Joe Burrow, and it's going to be these receivers who, it's going to be Chase, it's going to be Higgins, but it's also going to be Trenton Irwin. It's going to be Tyler Boyd. They're going to utilize Hayden Hurst. They are a very deep team in terms of their skill positions. And Like I said, if Chris Jones starts disrupting things on a play-by-play basis, and they need to get the ball out quicker, the Bengals are very well equipped to do that.
Yep. And one thing that I think the Bengals are better built for than the Jaguars is they have the guys to attack the Kansas City DBs, which is probably their weakest point of that defense, just because they're young and they've been injured this season. This is really like, hey, you're getting thrown into the fire now. But they have the guys to attack them on the outside. So, yeah, Chris Jones is going to be a huge factor in this game. But if Joe Burrow just even has enough time to isolate that one-on-one matchup, it really makes me wonder, like, does Spags blitz? Does he bring pressure? Or does he just try and win with 4? Because if he tries to bring pressure and it doesn't get there, then you're leaving your DBs out to dry. And you don't want to do that against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So the chess match between Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan, and Steve Spagnuolo is going to be really fun.
Yeah, and I remember last year against Baltimore, like the biggest thing for the Ravens, they just were able to drive down the field is because the Chiefs didn't change what they were doing in terms of what they were just sitting in that same zone the entire game. So I'm going to be interested to see, like, are they going to sit in a lot of too high? Are they going to go, one safety and just load the box a little bit more to take away the underneath stuff and try to open up gaps for guys to get through? Like, this is going to be a big test for the Bengals offensive line. But if they do get enough time, it's going to be a big test for guys like Trent McDuffie, who are going to be, I'm going to be also interested to see how they decide that matchup, how Spags is going to, align who against who defensively. So if Joe does have enough time to just cook and McDuffie isn't playing well and Chris Jones isn't getting there as much as he needs to, like, they're going to need a big day from 15, and that's going to be a lot to ask when you're dealing with a high ankle sprain. Absolutely.
It's shaping up for another really, really fun duel between these two guys. Like,
I hope so.
It's gonna be fun to watch. Patrick Mahomes still on one leg. He was still so good. He was still so good on one leg.
It's not fair, man. Like, I hope that people, and I understand we do this, because we're in football media and whatever, and we're gonna do it. People make these tier lists and these tiers and stuff. I don't want anybody in the same tier as Patrick Mahomes. Like, he is his own. He is his own tier, and
Patrick Mahomes and everybody else.
Yes, and look, we're gonna sit through an off season of, all right, is it Burrow or Mahomes, or is it Burrow or Allen? Like, I already have a headache from everything that's gonna happen, but I'm just going to enjoy this and hope that it's a 35-33, 35-32 just shootout. Both guys play really well. I hope we get it from both championship games, because we very much have the potential to do so.
Absolutely, it's gonna be one of those really fun weekends of football where you sit back after the game, like, man, that was awesome. We get to do that again.
Just like sitting like, oh my goodness, I need a cigarette after that. That was just that was incredible.
Definitely.
Hey, now that the Jaguars are eliminated, I don't know if there's a sports book that has these odds, but what are the odds that Trevor Lawrence makes an appearance on AEW television before the NFL season starts?
Oh, I'd hammer those odds.
Me too.
Hammer them.
If they do like another Stadium Stampede match, like, he'll have at least a cameo role.
He'll have a cameo. There'll be a Doug Peterson cameo in there. I think Doug Peterson's that kind of guy. He'll do some fun stuff. I definitely think you're going to get a Roy Robertson Harris, though.
Yeah.
That's going to be the guy. You're the unexpected guy that's going to show up.
I could just hear Excalibur now in commentary. Oh my goodness, that's Roy Robertson Harris from the Jacksonville Jaguars.
It's gonna be so exciting. I'm just like, yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is fantastic. If you can't spoil them yet, don't worry about it. But do you have picks for this weekend? Who do you think will play in the Super Bowl?
Man, I really don't want to pick against Patrick Mahomes, but if he's not 100%, I'm kind of leaning the Bengals. And I said it, I think midway through the season, I think the Niners are the favorites in the NFC. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going Bengals Niners in the Super Bowl, and that's also be really fun. But I wouldn't be surprised if the other teams win.
That's where I'm leaning right now too, and very much the same feeling. Like, will it shock me if we get Kansas City, Philadelphia, or a different combination of the two? No. Just right now, man, the Bengals look unstoppable, and I think they're more talented in terms of their skill position guys and just the playmakers that they have on defense than Kansas City. But like you said, would it shock me if Mahomes just goes off and gets to another Super Bowl? No. And then in terms of San Francisco, it's like we talked about. If Brock Purdy plays as close to a flawless game as they can, I think that they win. So it's going to be a very fun Sunday. Hopefully, it lives up to the hype. JP Acosta, my friend, it's very, very fun to be joined by you. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Of course, follow me at Acosta32_JP. I write for SB Nation. I do a lot of NFL work. I'm also going to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So,
let me buy you a beer in Mobile. Then I'll see you there.
Absolutely. I will be there. I'll be doing content from the Senior Bowl. So be on the lookout for that too.
In that case, my friend, I will see you next week. Very fun doing this with you. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us as the Pump Fake. We'll see you again before championship weekend. We'll be here Friday or Saturday. I'll tweet it out or whatever. But regardless, thank you for joining us. We'll see you later on in the week. It's Pump Fake.